The PS2 was home to a wide selection of shooters that made the console one of the best places to be for fans of the genre. Developed by Sony and released in 2006, Homura takes on much inspiration from its competitors, but manages to mix these elements together to help carve out something it can call its own. It all takes place in the Japanese Edo period and revolves around several characters and their quest to locate the Heaven's Jewel. There's not that much in the way of narrative, but it does serve the action well and help propel the events of each run forward. Gameplay is where Homura begins to shine. You get to fly around at high speeds, all the while avoiding at times what seems like a million projectiles, with your energy weapon and sword being used to annihilate anything in your path. It's a rather simple setup as well. There's only two buttons, with one being to shoot and the other to draw your sword. The latter soon becomes the star of the show, with it being used not only to go on the offensive, but also to defend. You can block and deflect incoming projectiles, as well as perform a mad dash that obliterates everything on the screen. Although it's quite pricey these days and goes for about £75, if you're at all a fan of shooters, Homura is a real blast and will provide hours upon hours of entertainment. One of the most surprisingly rare and expensive games on the PS2 and PAL regions is Garfield Saving Arlene. It's essentially a 3D platformer that sees you filling the role of Garfield as you set out with your friend Audie in the hopes of locating Arlene. As with most 3D platformers, there is a huge variety of levels, with most of them being entirely open for the player to explore. To be honest with you, I expected this one to be rather crap, but once you actually start to play, it soon becomes a rather competent experience that manages to hold its own against some of the big hitters on the PS2. The game is made up of several mechanics that makes traversing the world an absolute breeze, one of the most important being the way in which Garfield and Audie can work together. He can help you jump long distances and even hold his own during combat. The pair make a lovable duo throughout the adventure, with a ton of charm and jokes that make going through it all the more enjoyable. Now, the reason why it's become so expensive and rare is that upon its release, not many copies were put into circulation, which has caused the remaining ones to slowly rise in price as the years have passed. It now goes for about £150 and is getting harder and harder to find. Dragon Blaze is another shooter that started out life in the arcades, and it wasn't until several years later that it found a new home on the PS2. Now, Dragon Blaze plays like many other vertical shooters and allows you to choose from a selection of characters before jumping into the fight. There are 4 in total, which all possess a string of basic abilities such as a normal shot and a devastating bomb that will help out in tight spots. But what makes Dragon Blaze a bit different is, like the name suggests, instead of futuristic ships, you're instead mounted on top of dragons. These dragons can be dismounted, which adds an extra dimension to the gameplay, as they can act as a piercing weapon that shoots across the screen and then lays out a volley of shots until you call it back. It's an interesting mechanic, and thanks to the insane difficulty Dragon Blaze offers, you'll find yourself using it quite often. It now goes for about £80 on the PS2, but thankfully it has also seen a re-release and can be easily acquired on the PS4 for much cheaper. The PS2 is no stranger to quality hack and slashes, but like many other games on the system, some of them often fall through the cracks into the void of obscurity and never really receive the recognition they deserve. One example of this has to be Blood Will Tell. It sees the player assuming the role of 2 playable characters that each possess their own unique fighting styles and abilities that makes playing as both a truly individual affair. The entire adventure sees you scouring the land in the hopes of locating 48 separate enemies who at the beginning of the journey steal parts of your body. As you would expect, by locating and ultimately defeating each enemy, you slowly gain back these stolen parts, and although the game can be completed without collecting each of them, because of this it does provide a reason to play through the adventure several times over in order to acquire each and every part. Now, combat is where the game truly comes to life and sees you possessing both a light and heavy attack, as well as the use of your implants that provide many interesting ways to take down enemies. The real goal of the combat is to string all of these abilities together in order to perform devastating combos. Figuring out how they all connect is half of the fun and really helps elevate the combat to a level not often seen in other games. Blood Will Tell is a solid experience that everyone should give a go. If you're willing to do so, the game now goes for about £100 in the PAL territories. Devil Summoner is another shoot-off of the popular Shin Megami Tensei series, which all revolves around the exploits of the hero known as Raidu. He is the 14th in a long line of Devil Summoners, with a knack for battling and summoning demons, whilst being entrusted with a destiny of protecting the capital city of Edo. Now, one aspect that helps the adventure stand out is the time period in which it is set. The game takes place during the early 1900s and sees Raidu and his partner, the lazy detective, investigating a series of unusual demon uprisings. Like most RPGs, the battle system is a huge part of the overall experience, and unlike previous entries, this time around it is all presented in real time. In battle, Raidu can move around a small battlefield, block enemy attacks, counter-attack, and expose enemy weaknesses with his elemental-based guns. The main means of attack is the sword, but the guns can also stun opponents and even deter major attacks. But what makes this even better is that you have the ability to capture several of these demons, and then utilize them both in and outside of battle. Each of them come with a range of advantages, so capturing as many as you can soon becomes a top priority throughout the adventure. If you're a fan of RPGs, and more importantly the Shin Megami Tensei series as a whole, Devil Summoner is well worth it. It'll set you back around £100 if you're looking for a physical copy though. The Raiden series has seen many releases over the years, starting way back in 1990, and has never been at the forefront when it comes to shooters. It's always offered a rather generic approach to the popular genre, and never quite managed to stand out amongst the sea of competitors on the market. The third iteration is no different, and offers the same generic take many will know from the series, but that's not entirely a bad thing. Sure, it can look bland and uninspired, but the gameplay is solid, and provides a competent experience that will likely satisfy players. Gameplay-wise, it seems to go back to its roots and offers a no-frills approach, with your ship possessing several weapons that help deal with the onslaught of enemies. The difficulty never pushes back too much, resulting in a somewhat casual affair, but with that being said, there's an exception to the rule, and Raiden 3's exception is the outstanding double play mode. Here, players looking for something new will be able to test themselves with the most brutal shoot-'em-up experience ever devised. It's based on a technique made famous by Japanese Ikaruga players. The left analog stick is your red craft, with the right being your blue. It'll set you back around £100 if you're on the lookout for a physical copy. By no means is it the best shooter on the system, but it's still one that well and truly deserves a go. As many long-time watchers will know, I'm a huge fan of the Shin Megami Tensei series, and one of my favourite entries has to be Persona 3. Like most games in the series, it sees you assuming the part of a student who has recently transferred to a new school. Upon arriving, it soon becomes apparent that not all is right with the city, as an abundance of coffins line the streets. You soon snap out of it, and learn later on that you were apparently awake during something known as the Dark Hour. This Dark Hour is at the centre of everything that transpires during the game, and it prompts the protagonist and his friends to learn as much as they can about it. Now, gameplay steals the show, with each battle playing out in a turn-based fashion and granting the player the use of several abilities, the most impressive being that of entities known as personas that grant the user a wide range of options. The best thing about these creatures is that several of them can be fused together to create even more formidable allies. It's a really neat system, and allows the player to express themselves in an untold number of ways. Now, visually, Persona 3 steals the show. The somewhat cartoonish aesthetic and sleek presentation lends a touch of style not often found with other games of the same nature, and helps propel it even further into one of the best RPGs on the system. If you're looking to pick it up, it now goes for about £140 for a complete in-box copy. Q-On is another survival horror. It all revolves around the demon-infested manor that the player is tasked with exploring and getting to the bottom of what truly happened, largely split up into 3 separate phases. They are known as Yin, Yang and Q-On, with the third becoming available once you've completed the previous 2. Although the story at first may appear quite cliché and uninteresting, it quickly becomes rather engaging, original and totally engrossing. Visually, Q-On is rather impressive on the PS2. The entire adventure will manage to draw you into its creepy and dark tone all the more easier. As with most survival horrors, the gameplay can be a bit hit or miss, and unfortunately Q-On never really excels in this department. General navigation is rather clumsy but functional, with running never being advised as it will drain your health rather quickly. The game promotes a slow, methodical approach to exploration that I myself didn't mind, but it may have the potential to piss some players off. Combat though is Q-On's saving grace, thanks to the intricate card system that allows the player to unlock and utilize a whole series of abilities, and despite popular belief belief it is possible to perform combos with these skills, but it's all dependent on timing that can take a bit of getting used to. Overall, Q1 is a solid adventure, but thanks to its limited release and lack of success out of Japan, the price has skyrocketed to around £220 if you're looking for a physical copy. Michigan Report from Hell has to be one of the most unique horror games on the PlayStation 2. It sees you taking up the role of a news cameraman as you head out to Michigan to investigate a series of strange events. It's not long before it all goes to hell and you're plunged into an absolute nightmare with you and your team trying to escape the various monsters roaming the city. Now there's not that much in terms of gameplay, with your role simply being to film the various characters who all carry out the actions you'd usually be doing yourself. The only task you seem to ever get to do is to tag a range of items scattered throughout the environment, which causes your teammates to interact with them. It can all soon become rather boring, with the purpose of the game being to film things which are either suspenseful or erotic, and what this basically boils down to is whether you spend the majority of your time with the camera pointed at your reporter's head or at her crotch. It really is that simple. However, one positive has to be the replay value, with several endings to unlock as well as a ton of items to tag and a whole range of extra outfits for the reporters. It won't be for everyone, and with an asking price of around £230, I can see only the most hardcore of collectors acquiring this one. There are many survival horror games on the PS2, but one of the most disturbing and quite frankly horrific games is Rule of Rose. The narrative is quite mysterious and dark, with the player assuming the role of a young girl named Jennifer as she encounters a group of children known as the Red Crayon Aristocrats. The group give Jennifer several tasks to complete throughout the adventure, with the constant threat of them turning on you should you fail. Now gameplay wise, it's a bit of a mixed bag, with many aspects playing out in a clunky manner. Controls are not smooth and you'll often find yourself running into obstacles or going the completely wrong way thanks to the awkward camera system. Combat is nigh on impossible when approaching multiple enemies as well, and it soon devolves into button mashing hell. On a positive note though, the visuals are actually quite impressive on the PS2 and do a good job of creating the somewhat dire atmosphere the game presents. Now the main reason this game is so rare is that due to some of the events that transpire in the adventure, some countries decided not to release it. Couple this with the limited run and it's no wonder that the game now goes for about £300. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos and to take part in giveaways. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you in the next one.